Hello and welcome to Reddit Roast number 52. Mal, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Sam.
So for those watching, concentrate, Sam, stop drinking your tea. For those watching who have never seen a Reddit Roast before, we are out here to read through the profiles on Reddit and evaluate them and try to offer some constructive advice about how to improve your profile, which schools to focus on, and which areas of weaknesses or strengths to be aware of in your profile when it comes to MBA applications, probably in about 4 months' time from today. So, Mal, who have we got today?
So today we have an incoming investment banker and a pro bono finance educator who's applying for the top deferred programs out there. We've got a Mongolian AI engineer. We've got an orthopedic surgeon looking to pivot careers, a Canadian corporate strategist, and we might just go off on a random tangent at the end about low GPA and write an optional essay, even addressing that. We'll write that live, so stay tuned for
Awesome.
that.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, let's talk about the first profile then. This is the deferred MBA candidate that you were talking about.
Yes, yeah. Profile one, undergrad at T10, university undergrad in international studies and economics, a double major with a GPA of 3.91. Test score GMAT 675. Work experience, OP is an incoming full-time investment banking analyst at a bulge bracket bank in real estate. Is also targeting real estate private equity after his MBA. Background, first generation college student from an ORM group, is a permanent resident in the US, extracurriculars, quite a few, founder of a non-profit delivering pro bono financial education and advisory services for SMEs across 10 countries, has about 150 members and has raised 100K since inception, which was in 2024, is the founder of a finance club and recruitment program at the university, did his senior thesis on labor market data reliability and has a departmental honors in both subjects. Advisor and speaker at University Career Center, connecting under-resourced students with finance networks. OP's long-term goal is to be a partner at a real estate private equity firm focused on data centers and multifamily assets. OP is applying to HBS, GSB, MIT Sloan, Wharton, Kellogg, and Columbia, the deferred programs. Couple of questions. OP says, I know my quant is terrible. I'm thinking of retaking, but it seems too late for this deferred cycle. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, okay. Let's go from the top then. Academic. GPA 3.91 is very nice. From a decent school, T10, real, economics, double major, like real strong academic background. Absolutely, certainly from undergrad perspective. Test score, 675. It's not bad. It's not ideal for two reasons. One, bankers as a cohort, as a group, are expected to typically have slightly higher test scores. They are a very, very competitive bunch. And deferred applicants as well are typically, still in university mode. They typically have higher GMAT scores as well. So 675 is a bit on the lower side, I would say, for this profile. Not bad, but a little bit on the lower side. Certainly not a strength for a banker and deferred applicant, and particularly because it's the quant that's low, which is slightly concerning. On the professional side, so it's great, absolutely awesome that OP has this return offer from a bulge bracket investment bank. As far as career progress for a deferred applicant goes, can't get much better than that. Top tier bank, return offer on the cards, going to basically be working in the real estate focus group of an investment bank for the next however many years. It's a brilliant, next chapter that OP is going to have. So that's great. From a demographic perspective, ORM, and I think what OP, let's say, where is it, the demographic? First generation from an ORM group. I think what OP means from an ORM group is basically, ORM groups in America, I think basically means sort of white or Asian, is sort of what I think OP is getting at. But first generation is definitely a positive for the application profile. Why? Because schools sense you're going to bring a different perspective to the discussion. And it's something that they publish as well, first generation percentage. So they will like that. Also, with permanent resident with a green card, visas are not a concern. So definitely a good, solid demographic sort of background for MBA applications. Extracurriculars. I think this is where this profile really shines. particularly when compared to other bankers. And anyone who watches these Reddit roasts often will know that I rant constantly about bankers not having extracurriculars. Well, this one does, right? Especially this first bullet point. 150 members of a non-profit delivering pro bono financial education and advisory for SMEs across 10 countries. And this guy founded it. Guy, girl, actually, I don't think we have gender here. Not sure. So anyway, this person founded it. This is an excellent extracurricular that really will stand out versus the certainly the bankers that the schools are used to seeing in the MBA application world. So great work, OP. That's seriously, seriously nice. I think the other extracurriculars are not bad, but they don't really care about the research, the thesis stuff that you've done. Everybody has some version of that. Ditto for the finance club at undergrad. Most people have been involved in clubs during undergrad, so that's not carrying that much weight. But maybe the speaker in the University Career Centre, okay, but the good one is the first nonprofit founder. So big plus on the extracurricular side. Goals. Generally wary of private equity goals, as regular viewers will know. Why? Typically quite a nepotistic industry. You kind of break into PE by working with them, maybe as if you're the investment bankers working on a deal for them, and they kind of poach you out of the investment bank. They don't typically have pipeline going into the business school, and they don't typically recruit that many business school graduates. So I'm often cautious about it. But in this case, OP is going to have that investment banking experience, let's say 2 or 3 years at that bulge bracket investment bank, does an MBA, and then actually would be in quite a good position to recruit for private equity, particularly within the real estate sector, which OP is going to have experience in. So all of that to say, the goals are solid, and I like it. So overall, solid profile, held back a little bit by that GMAT quant, but I still like this profile. I still think OP is going to have quite a decent chance at the M7X booth, and if not this year, in a few years' time, with 3 years of bulge bracket experience under her belt, I think solid profile.
And OP wants to know how this profile stacks up for the programs listed.
Okay. I think on paper, as I've explained, a strong profile. I think how ultimately the results are going to be driven here, what ultimately is going to drive how your profile stacks up, is the emotional intelligence angle. Now, bear with me a bit on this. What I mean, and I say this as a former banker, so I'm allowed to criticize bankers, right? Let's be clear. As a former investment banker, one of the things that bankers are typically known for, particularly the young, ambitious bankers, is not being especially emotionally intelligent. They're very career-driven, they're very hard-working, but they don't have a particularly strong rep when it comes to emotional intelligence. And that is what they're going to be looking for here. And particularly as a younger deferred applicant, have you built up that EQ? Have you had the life experience to build up that EQ? Big question mark. So on paper, OP has a good chance, but only if that EQ, emotional intelligence piece can come through. Now, we can talk about how to do that, but basically this is going to be really about your essays and about your letters of recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And any schools where OP is a strong fit or weak fit?
Yeah, I mean, I think playing into the finance theme is the big one, right? If any school's going to appreciate the bulge bracket experience, it's going to be Wharton and Columbia. They're really the finance powerhouses among the M7. Booth a bit to some extent, but OP says they don't want to go to Booth, so fine. So I think those are probably the ones that stand out. If we were talking more broadly, and maybe OP is not quite so focused on M7, I think NYU Stern would also perhaps later be a good idea as well. The NYC connections, place people in banking. Then there might be a conversation to be had there, but I think basically those are the main ones: Columbia and Wharton.
Okay. And what do you think OP can do to improve this profile?
Yeah, obviously the GMAT quant, she already knows this, right? terrible. I mean, I wouldn't say the quant is terrible, but it's not bad. It's not great. Certainly not the strongest compared to other investment banking deferred applicant potentials. We've just finished, to give you some context on this, we've just finished, as you know, working with a client with a very similar background to this, whose GMAT focus edition is a 715. All right. That is the not to say benchmark, because that's exceptional, but that's what OP is up against. A full 40 points higher. So, under no illusions, if this doesn't go well, the GMAT will be one factor. But the other thing that OP can do, and I mentioned this a little bit before, is really demonstrate that emotional intelligence in the essays and the letters of recommendation. Yeah. What do I mean by that? Harvard leadership essay. Rather than telling a story, and all the bankers love to do this, is during my internship, I was given this really last-minute task, and I worked really hard to get it done. That's like, yeah, that's showing hard work, but that's part of the course here. That's not showing emotional intelligence. The emotional intelligence is opening up and telling a story of vulnerability and not being perfect, and maybe getting some negative feedback and responding to that positively. Like that, showing that vulnerability and the emotional intelligence and the maturity to not have that ego interfering, as so many bankers have. That ultimately is going to be what differentiates OP when all's said and done, I think.
Yeah, okay. I think that's all of OP's questions. Should we move on to our next profile?
I would say, OP, get in touch. I'd love to help you put together those stories, but I think given the deadline for Wharton and Harvard deferred is on the 22nd in about 5 days' time, I don't think we have time for that. But if you come around to applying to full-time MBA programs in 2 or 3 years' time as a banker, I'm here to help. Okay, let's get on to the next profile then.
All right, profile 2. Is an MBA the right choice for me? Late 20s male, a non-US citizen with 7 years of work experience as a software engineer, with a bachelor's in chemical engineering, a master's in simulation sciences from Germany, and who is currently working full-time as an AI engineer at a local startup, while also working as a freelancer and a SaaS founder for a local market. Goal: my main intent is to get into the US tech market, found a startup, and work on a great product and get in contact with VCs. But my geographical location and visa issues are limiting my options. I'm considering STEM designated T7 MBA programs. I assume that's M7. Also looking for OPT work authorizations. More background if you're curious. Local market size is very small and undeveloped here in Mongolia. So OP is Mongolian, especially in AI and data science. Even big retail players and finance companies are hesitant when it comes to buying consumer-grade GPUs. So naturally, there's a limited number of software startups that can take off here. And even the most successful ones barely scratch the 50 million valuation threshold. So OP's got quite the story here. What do you think overall?
We don't have, on the academic front, we don't have that much information. I don't think we know the GPA or the GRE GMAT yet, right?
No, I don't think OP's mentioned GMAT.
Okay. So all we've got to go off is the undergrad. And okay, has a master's as well. I think OP's smart. We don't know whether that intelligence converts to good grades yet. Obviously, that will be an important factor. OP's targeting M7s. OP, you need, if your GPA is average at about 3.6, then your GMAT should be a little bit above average, if possible, at around 6.8, 6.95 would be a nice place to be. But, good luck with that. I'll assume that that's on track, and let's focus on the other parts of the profile then. So the software engineer, right? Software engineers are in an interesting spot right now because that is a market that has been massively disrupted by AI, both to the positive and to the negative. So it's really requiring a period of flexibility and adaptation and resilience from the software engineers out there at the moment. Lots of them are being made redundant because AI is supposedly stealing their jobs, but others are building really cool products using AI, and there's a massive opportunity. So really an industry in a state of flux. I think there will also be, to be blunt, there will be a lot of software engineer applicants at the moment. 30,000 Oracle workers just got made redundant. Some of them will be applying for MBA programs. So it's going to be a competitive demographic work group. But I do think OP it seems to be like on the cutting edge of that and does seem to be in a strong position. So Mongolian underrepresented for sure. Mongolian I think came up in the comments, was it?
No, it's in OP's little note up top.
Oh yeah, sorry here. The Mongolian background. So Mongolian definitely underrepresented in MBA world. They probably have. I worked with a Mongolian client about 2 years ago, and I'm pretty sure was like the only admit to many M7s. So definitely underrepresented group. Extracurriculars. Now, a little bit cautious here. I'm not seeing much in the way of extracurriculars. I think this this working as a freelancer and as a SaaS founder, this isn't really extracurricular because it's like OP's sort of day job. Basically, he's just doing the work from his day job, her day job, his day job outside of work. I'm not seeing much in the way of extracurriculars, and I'm worried that there isn't anything there. Culturally, we know that Americans have been brought up, certainly with the undergrad system, that really values extracurriculars. Internationals often don't have as strong extracurriculars, and this might be a case of that. Not
Mm.
sure, but OP, if that's true that you don't have much going on outside of work, this could be an issue and something to work on. Okay, in terms of goals, I have beef with this. I have a problem with this. OP is basically saying I just need the MBA to get a visa to the US, and that
Mm.
is a problem for many reasons. Primarily, the main one being if you just need a visa, they would rather give your spot to someone who's actually going to benefit from the program, to be blunt. So I do not like that as a narrative at all. And I understand that that might just be what OP's publishing, but just make sure that you do not let them, anyone watching this, make sure they do not even get a sniff that you are just doing the MBA to get OPT and get your foot in the door in the US work market. They spend so much effort building an incredible curriculum and getting in great speakers. You're not just going to use them for the OPT. If they get a smell of that, forget it, you're out. So be very, very careful on this. I also don't like entrepreneurship. They won't like entrepreneurship as the short-term goal either. That is what OP is saying, right? Get into the US tech market, found a startup. That is okay for a longer term goal, but it's extremely risky as a short term goal. You're not going to have a salary, which is negative for their rankings. It might not work at all. There's a lot of risk there. So my suggestion for goals would be have a short term goal that is working as an employee in this space with a longer term goal to set up your own startup. Hopefully that's clear. If not, OP, get in touch and we can sort of talk about that in more detail. But basically, I think a solid profile, but quite narrow.
Mhm.
What I mean by that is that no outstanding academics that I can see, no extracurriculars that I can see. It's really just somebody who wants a visa, and that could be a problem.
Yeah. If you scroll down to the comments, I saw one where it's quite interesting. OP mentions that bit lower. Yeah, there. I haven't really tried applying to US-based startups directly, and OP's been in Germany for 4 to 5 years. So OP's going to be applying from Germany.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, so that's I think important for the context for my next question. Is that OP is considering STEM designated M7s? Is the MBA an appropriate choice for OP, or should he look for alternative options?
Okay. I mean, I read through the comments earlier and I see like a mix of kind of responses on this. One person says that the MBA solves three problems at once. Another person says yours isn't a capability gap where an MBA adds a lot of value. So basically, mixed responses. My take on this is that an MBA is exactly what OP needs, but only if OP is going to benefit from it in a kind of a learning way. If
Mhm.
OP is just using this to get the visa and meet founders, there are better ways to do it. And to be blunt, the school will hate hearing that. But if OP is also going to learn something, and he is, right? He maybe doesn't realize it. He maybe thinks that's all he needs. But if you're going to be a startup founder, you need marketing, you need finance. And I don't see any marketing or finance in OP's background right now. So he doesn't maybe think he thinks he can just do it by meeting VCs. But the minute the VCs start picking apart your balance sheet, OP, you're screwed. You need an MBA for other things beyond just this network. And if that resonates with OP, and he's going to go into this process open-minded and acknowledging that he doesn't know everything and learning from the MBA, then it can be fantastic for his development. But as I say, if he thinks he's just going to use it for a visa and move on, it's a waste of time, money, effort, everything.
Yeah. Okay. And so what do you think then OP can do to improve his chances?
Okay. Well, let's assume that OP is seeing this and thinking, okay, I acknowledge there are things I can learn from an MBA. The marketing would be useful for my startup. The corporate finance would be useful for speaking to VCs. Then how do you maximize your chances? One, am I missing something with these extracurriculars? If there's nothing, then they're going to think that OP is just purely focused on building a product that's right in front of them. No interest in making friendships, no interest in building community, nada. That's a problem. So the key gap then is building that out. Get some more post-graduation, so professional experience building community and getting involved in in extracurriculars. Watch a few more roasts to see what other people are doing in their extracurriculars. Even today, in today's session, we've got people starting non-profits. We've got people doing mentorship for underprivileged people. There's all sorts. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of thing that they need to see, and OP doesn't have any of that right now, as far as I can tell. So that's the big one. And then the GMAT is also the other thing. We don't know OP's GPA, so and obviously the importance of the GMAT kind of will hinge on that a little bit. But assuming OP's GPA is okay, not extreme either way, then a GMAT will be important, particularly as OP's mother tongue is not English. As a Mongolian applying from Germany, it's not going to be assumed that he speaks good English. And so they will also be looking at that GMAT verbal score. And if it's weak, they're going to question your ability to really add value during the program. So GMAT, and particularly GMAT verbal, will be important. Quant will be expected to be solid as an AI engineer and whatever. You're expected to have fairly decent quant anyway. The verbal will be important. Again, depends a bit on the GPA, but I think that's good advice nonetheless.
Yeah. And also, I think if OP has to put entrepreneurship as his longer-term goal, then the shorter-term goal, OP could work on that narrative and connect it to what he's already doing right now.
Yeah. The key thing there will be discovering what really matters to you, right? And it sounds a bit cheesy and everyone's thinking, oh, that's what Stanford asked. But like peeling the essays aside, just figure out what it is you want to do, what kind of impact you want to have. So you want to start up you want to found a tech startup in the US, work on a great product. Okay, but tackling what problem? Why do you care about that problem? They want to see somebody who's genuinely passionate about a certain cause, and the product is the way to tackle that problem. And if you don't seem to have anything that you care about, then you're just building for the sake of tackling like some random issue that no one really cares about, you're not going to stand out. Whereas if you were forced to leave Mongolia because of the lack of accessibility to internet connections to be able to pursue your tech passion, so you want to build a product that enables young Mongolians to access tech resources, right, now I'm starting to understand why that matters. So it's something like that, something genuine, something heartfelt that's going to make the difference here. And that's the other thing that OP can do to improve his chances, is try and identify what that meaningful kind of purpose is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
That's really useful. I think we can move on to the next one.
Profile thoroughly roasted. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Orthopedic surgeon.
Yes. An orthopedic surgeon pivoting to healthcare innovation and business. With a 328 GRE and a perfect quant, OP is applying to HSW, INSEAD, and LBS. Hi, I'm an orthopedic surgeon with international clinical and academic experience, and I'm considering an MBA to pivot towards healthcare innovation strategy and possibly consulting or investing in health tech over the long term. Stats, we mentioned the GRE. Medical background, so non-traditional compared with the usual pool. Background is orthopedic surgeon, no number of years specified, cross-border training and work exposure, some strong research work, long-term goal is to move from being a clinician to a broader leadership role to build, scale, and evaluate healthcare solutions. Why MBA? It's about building the strategic and financial and leadership toolkit to have a wider impact. Target schools, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, INSEAD, LBS, we covered that. Quite a few questions, but what do you think at first glance?
First glance, academic 328 is okay. Obviously perfect quant is solid. It's okay. It's not blowing any lights out, but it's all right. We don't know the GPA, but we know that my suspicion is it's probably quite high undergrad GPA to be able to pursue the journey of getting to become an orthopedic surgeon. They don't really care about your sort of mid-school kind of grades that much, but the undergrad grade, which matters, I suspect is high. So overall, academics, solid, nothing outstanding, but solid. From a work experience perspective, a medical background is going to be very, very, will be unique. And I think a lot of the comments, I was reading through them, a lot of the comments agree with this. It will be unique, but also not necessarily working in your favor. And I'll elaborate on that comment in a moment. Basically, you have the foundation to apply, definitely, but there's more thinking to be done, and we can talk about what that means. I don't know much about the demographic. I don't think it's mentioned, so I'll skip that. But basically, I think male, female. I don't think we know anything, right?
No.
We don't know anything about the demographic, so skip that. Extracurriculars. Are you too busy as an orthopedic surgeon to pursue extracurriculars? Potentially. And if you are, that's possibly an issue. If there are things going on that you just haven't mentioned, then possibly there are some. I don't know. We will have to skip that as well. Let's talk about goals, because this is where this profile is really interesting. OP is talking about not walking away from medicine, but about building the toolkit to have a wider impact across healthcare. Now that sounds really nice. That is a good goal. I think specifically what that means is a short-term role in maybe healthcare strategy and a longer-term role maybe in investing or consulting in health tech. Generally speaking, I like the goals. I do like the goals. I think this makes sense. There is going to be questions about why OP would want to pivot from being an orthopedic surgeon to healthcare strategy, but we can talk about how to address that. But I think generally the goals are solid. So overall, lots of potential, but also lots of work to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so let's get to OP's questions.
Yeah.
Is the 328 GRE competitive enough for those schools, or is there any real value in retaking the test?
It's solid. It very much depends on the undergrad. If the undergrad GPA is below the school's average of about 3.6 or so, then a higher GRE would be helpful. If the undergrad GPA, as I speculate, is quite high, then a 328 is just fine. Do not waste more time on that test. Focus on building up a really compelling why MBA story. I hope that answers the question. I think, I think that 328 should be okay.
Yeah. Next question is, how do ADCOMs usually view a surgeon pivoting into business compared with a more traditional client applicant?
Okay, let's break this down. I mean, high level, it's unique, right? Mm-hmm. It's unique. There are not many people who are pivoting from orthopedic surgery in particular to do an MBA. That's relatively niche. So that's one thing. It also is beneficial in that you'll provide a very interesting perspective to the classroom, not just how to fix bones, but also the leadership and communication skills that come from, giving patients bad news, for example, from going into very intense negotiations with the management of a hospital, for example. So you will bring an incredibly interesting perspective to the business school cohort. And also their expectation or their kind of assumption is that your post-MBA salary will also be pretty high. Now, those are the good things, but there's a couple of question marks that this raises. One, there could be questions over your financial situation. particularly if med school has cost you a lot of money and you're already in a lot of debt. So that is one. If that's not the case and you're not in debt and you can definitely afford the MBA without any issues, make that clear, because that will be a big plus in your column, and kind of reassure them on the financial side. So that's one. The other thing that's really kind of the question, and I alluded to this before, is why would you go and do an MBA if you're, as an orthopedic surgeon, you've already spent years at university? Why do you want to go back? It's quite it's not obvious. You're going to need to really explain this clearly. And you can't just say, because I want to have an impact, as a lot of MBA applicants kind of do, because are you really going to have more impact doing strategy than like being a surgeon on people?
Yeah.
Literally cutting them open. Like, that's going to be a tough argument to make. So this why MBA piece is going to be absolutely crucial. Now, it could also be, before I go into that, let's talk about how you could frame a why MBA argument well. OP is basically saying having a wider impact across healthcare. That's starting to be on the right track. I can kind of see that. You can only operate on one person at once, but if you can fix the US like health insurance situation, that will impact literally hundreds of millions of people. So I can see there is something going here, but it's going to have to be quite specific, right? Which area, how exactly are you going to help the population? How are you going to help people? I'll give you a bit of an example on this. So when I worked in investment banking, the guy sitting next to me was basically working in the healthcare coverage group, and he was a qualified and had been practicing gynecology, right? He's a qualified gynecologist sitting on a trading floor, and you're thinking, I immediately thought, like, what? Like, surely you could be helping so many more people in your previous role. Well, the argument you could make in this case as an orthopedic surgeon is, yes, but orthopedic technology right now is maybe really behind, or maybe really underfunded, or maybe really inaccessible, or maybe really something, which I experienced as an orthopedic surgeon. In other words, there's a bottleneck in my little niche industry, and I'm going to fix that at scale. Something like that, you could make the case that you are going to have a wider impact, but it does need to be granular, it does need to be specific, and it does need to be well thought through.
Yeah.
I know I've been on about 4 different tangents there, but whatever, bring me back on track.
You answered OP's next question, actually. OP's question was, what was the biggest likely weakness in this profile? Leadership, goals, clarity, why MBA, or school fit? And I think OP needs to focus on why MBA.
On the why MBA, right? And this is, to sort of summarize what I was saying before, the biggest likely weakness in this profile is your why MBA. I am sure you have great leadership stories from being a surgeon. Your goals, it sounds like you're going to come up with clear, going to become clear. But then the why MBA fitting to those goals, that is going to be the biggie. Now, so basically, you need to make the case that you're going to have more impact as a consultant, investor, strategist than you are as a surgeon. And that's difficult to do. It can be done, but it's difficult to do. Now, the other factor here is, one of my good friends on my MBA was a former dentist who'd had an accident and had lost the dexterity in one of her hands. And as I'm sure anyone who's been to a dentist knows, they're pulling your mouth apart, they're scrubbing this, they're cutting that. They need incredibly good dexterity. And that accident basically forced her out of dentistry. And she was using the MBA to pivot. So you can also bring in personal experience here, right? If you can't no longer be an orthopedic surgeon for a very specific reason, like losing dexterity in your hands, that also can play in. They understand, we're human. That is a very valid reason for also wanting to do an MBA. I'm not sure if this is OP's case specifically, but if you're in medicine and you're watching and that resonates, hope that's of some use. Okay, so that answers question 3.
Yeah, question 4 is, does this profile feel more naturally suited to INSEAD and LBS than the Harvard stuff?
Look, I guess it comes down to 2 things for me. One is the international component. Would you genuinely enjoy a couple of years, maybe a little bit more abroad? Would you genuinely? Because if you wouldn't, like, don't go to INSEAD for the, if you're not going to enjoy being in France for a year. The other factor is financial. These programs in Europe, in the UK, INSEAD and LBS, are shorter and, generally speaking, if you include the cost of living, cheaper. And if OP is for financial reasons wants to get back into the work environment very quickly, a 1-year program could be very beneficial. On the other hand, if OP definitely wants to go back to the US and quickly, the HSW brands are far more recognized and valuable in the US. And also, industry focus. So OP mentioned this idea of maybe going into, I think it was here, possibly consulting, investing in health tech later. This is quite a wide range of goals: strategy, investing, consulting. There's quite a lot of different areas there. That also is a factor. Let me help you narrow it down. Basically, if strategy or consulting is the focus, LBS and INSEAD really are strong in those areas. If innovation and investing in health tech are the focus, Europe, frankly, is weak. And therefore, these schools are not as strong as well. So there's a cost factor and there's an industry factor. And so OP basically needs to narrow down those goals quite a bit as part of this decision.
Yeah, okay. And the final question from OP is, what would his essays and recommendations need to prove for this to become a compelling application?
Yeah, that's basically what I said before, showing that you're generally going to have more impact as a consultant than you are, or as an investor than you are as a orthopedic surgeon, and reassuring them on the costs, on the financial ability, and on the GPA as well. I think we don't have a GPA, right? That might potentially need to feature in like an optional essay or something. But I think those are the main things.
Okay. All right.
One more thing, actually. It would be great if the recommendations could back up your why MBA argument. So if it was like, if your recommender is somebody who kind of treats you who's a kind of a mentor to you, if the recommender says OP has expressed her interest in the innovation or the technology side, and I think OP would be really well suited to that, that would also strengthen the why MBA narrative, and would be a big plus as well. In contrast, a recommendation that is purely medical focused isn't going to carry as much weight. For example, OP is an outstanding orthopedic surgeon, particularly in the area of hip joints or whatever. Like, okay, cool. But business school doesn't care about that. So that's what I'm trying to get at here. Okay? All right. Cool.
Profile 4 for today. Let's move on. It is 27 female Canadian. Round 1 versus round 2 for Euro targets. Background and demographics: 27 female Canadian undergrad, top Canadian university, honors in economics and French diploma. GPA 3.7 out of 4. GMAT not taken yet, aiming for later this summer or early fall. OP speaks English and basic Spanish and French. Work experience 4.5 to 5 years by the time I applied, tech consulting at a Big Four, and then OP is currently a corporate strategist at a big bank. Post MBA goals: corporate strategy or banking or consulting at MBB or Tier 2 firms in Europe. Target schools: HEC Paris, IMD, INSEAD, LBS, and ESA. R1 versus R2 and the European job market focused questions. But first, I want to get your read on this, Sam.
Give that a little upvote as well. Are we giving them all upvotes? Well, yes. Good. Right, academic. 3.7 out of 4. I believe that's, from a Canadian university. So it is on a 4.0 scale. So that is a strong GPA. Solid. 3.6 average. That is a little bit over the average. That's solid. Nothing outstanding, but strong. I don't see a GMAT anywhere,
Not
but I
taken.
not
Yeah.
taken. Okay, but I will go. I will kind of jump the gun a bit and say for these schools with this GPA, uh, mid to high 600 GMAT would be nice. 665, 675, 685 would be a nice threshold, a nice target. Maybe a little bit higher for INSEAD and LBS.
Mm.
Okay, so academically solid. Good luck with the GMAT or GRE, whatever you decide to do. Professional, interesting mix, corporate strategy, and here, tech consulting and corporate strategy at a big bank. Slightly like unusual. Those are not, those are quite different roles. So interesting that OP has kind of made that quite big pivot, an unusual perspective there for sure. And both of them are classic pre-MBA industries. So in contrast to the previous profile, which was an orthopedic surgeon, why do you want to do an MBA? Versus this one, like they're not going to be asking that question quite so clearly. An MBA fits very clearly into both of these career trajectories. So, on the other hand, very typical pre-MBA work. So quite a lot of other strategists applying, and therefore quite a lot of competition to be up against. But still solid. Demographic: Canadian female applying to European schools, fairly underrepresented. Fairly underrepresented. Quite a got to be quite open and willing to make quite a big leap there to go from North America across to Europe. So they will like that. In terms of extracurriculars, I'm not seeing any. Again, I don't know whether that's because there's none or whether that's because OP was too busy doing, working hard at the top Canadian university. If there are some OP, make sure you get them mentioned in your applications. And then in terms of goals, here, corporate strategy, banking, or consulting. Basically, like every kind of typical post MBA goal. It doesn't look like OP's done a huge amount of thinking there. OP going to need to narrow that down, and maybe we talk a little bit about what that could look like. So overall, a solid profile, definitely in the running for these schools. Does need to do a little bit more work on the test, obviously, and also the narrative career goals.
All right. OP's first question is, I want to push my GMAT to August or September, which means applying for round 2. Would that hurt my chances, or should I try to go for round 1?
Look, there isn't that much difference between round 1 and round 2. I think somebody crunched the numbers and said there's a 3% lower admit rate in round 2 versus round 1. It's small. It's not going to be the difference.
Mhm.
But my bigger question is, why do you need to push that from round 1? We're 17th of April today as we record. You've got 4 months until the deadline. Plan A really ought to be do the GMAT. Yeah, 2 months doing the GMAT, 2 months doing your application, job done, submit in round 1. I don't know why OP's looking at pushing. I guess maybe he wants to take like a vacation or something. Like, try and get it in round 1. I think even with a week off for a holiday, I think you could get that in. Consider, maybe speak to a tutor that can get your study plan for the GMAT really nailed down. Get it so you can nail that within 2 months. Working with a consultant should have no issues getting your application done in 2 months as well. So yeah, I mean, round 1 versus round 2, push it if you need to, but try and avoid it if you can.
Okay. And the other question is, given the current macro environment, what does the job market look like if you're graduating this year? Trying to understand this as a non-EU citizen for 28, 29.
So I'm based in Europe. For those watching, I'm based in Barcelona right now. I was in Amsterdam before, London before that. Definitely the European job market is suffering from the same ailments that are affecting the US job market, for sure, right now. I would caveat that with the outlook for 2029. Hey, if you know the outlook for 2029, don't go and do an MBA. Go and invest in something that makes some money, because you can see the future. I can't. Right? Whatever it looks like right now outside is not going to be the same in 2028, 29. So I would not try and predict that. I would try and kind of think about what we know right now. And that is that businesses that are hiring MBAs or businesses that are hiring in general are really, really interested in candidates who have a strong command of AI. In other words, candidates who can automate large parts of their own role and maximize their impact. That you can get from an MBA.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that if the job market does not improve, then an MBA is exactly what you need to stand out in the increasingly competitive job market, particularly from an AI perspective. You could go and do some AI courses as well to strengthen that. But an MBA, if you take some AI focused electives, can reassure the adcom, or in this case, the recruiter, that you can smash it using AI. And that's super important. So I guess the answer to the question directly is yes, the job market is tough, just like in North America, but the MBA can help you,
Mm-hmm.
particularly if you play your cards right and take the right courses, take the right electives, etc.
Okay. And what do you think OP can do overall to improve your profile?
Yeah, I've touched on the important ones. Obviously, the GMAT GRE will be a factor, not absolutely crucial. The rest of the profile is strong, but it'll be a factor. So the GMAT is a big thing. Extracurriculars as well are going to be important. I suspect there are some, we just don't know what they are, but particularly community focused extracurriculars, right? Going to a soup kitchen once or twice, you're helping people. That's great. Well done. But the schools are going to see through that, and it's not going to be a massive factor. The really big one is community building. You're going to be part of 100, well, more in these, for these schools, 300 or so students who are coming together from all around the world, and they've got to create a community within 1 year for INSEAD, right? If you can show extracurriculars where you've built community, they will love it. And I'm not seeing that at the moment. So that's a factor. So ECs and GMAT are, I think, the big ones. I would also say one other point, actually, I've just thought of this, is regarding languages.
Mm-hmm.
French in particular will be really appreciated by HEC Paris and INSEAD that are both near Paris. And Spanish will be really appreciated by ESA and IE if you decide to apply to the other Spanish top business school. So I would also say that, like, don't stop learning those languages. The stronger those are, the more likely you are to be able to recruit, um, successfully in those job markets. So
Mm-hmm.
those three things: GMAT, languages, extracurriculars.
All right. Okay, that's all of our profiles for today, Sam. Should we go off on a bit of a random tangent?
I always love a bit of a random tangent. What have you got in mind?
So, I saw this profile. Uh, Low GPA of 3, but scored a 338 in the GRE. And we see this all the time. We see really low GPAs, sometimes 2.5, 2.6, 2.7. It's a real problem in the RMBA thread.
Mm.
So, I wanted to just see how we could address that through this profile. Let me go through it first. This is an Indian male, 27 years old. GPA of 338, which is excellent. It's a perfect quant. CGPA of a 5.84 out of 8 from India's top 5 national law universities. It's a 3.0 US equivalent, OP says. Work experience, OP has co-founded an EV charging station startup since October 21 and is a real estate finance consultant. He has 5 years of total work experience. Goal, finance or investment banking or fintech in NYC. OP already knows that he has some challenges, which is one, he's from an overrepresented background as an Indian male, has a low GPA, and has a no brand name employer. Since I want to pivot from law to finance, what is the possibility of securing an admit from T15? And should I keep any expectations for an M7 admit? What do you think?
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about it overall before we dive into his top challenge, which is the low GPA. So the first one, right, 338 out of 340. I think everybody knows how high that is, but if not, just to be clear, that is an outstanding GRE score and a perfect verbal in there as well. That's a really, really strong GRE score. From a As we've talked about, a 3.0 equivalent GPA is not as strong at all. Several profiles today that we've talked about have had, I think 3.9 was one profile today, 3.7 was another profile today. A 3.0 is low. And I think a really good optional essay will help address that. And we can talk about that afterwards. From a demographic perspective, OP is absolutely spot on. As an Indian male, he is very overrepresented. The only slight thing going in his favor is that he's not an engineer. There's an
Mhm.
Indian male engineer is extremely overrepresented. Indian male lawyer, not quite so much. Professional. I mean, cool work experience, right? Co-founded an EV charging startup.
Yeah.
That's great, particularly if that's like making money. If that's kind of was a nice experience, and I learned a lot. Still valid and good for your essays, but especially if that thing is making money, then that's a really big plus in OP's profile. And then the real estate finance consultant, that is a very kind of common pre-MBA background. Isn't going to blow any lights out, but it's not bad either. And 5 years of work experience, OP's at exactly the right point in his career, age-wise, for an MBA. So that's really, really cool. Extracurriculars, no mention.
Yeah. No.
Banged on about that a lot today, but if there aren't any, that could be a problem, but hopefully there are some. Goals. Wary about writing about investment banking goals. Fintech, a little bit more aligned with that, particularly that OP has been doing finance consulting. I think probably has quite a decent chance of breaking into a fintech. Investment banking, not quite so much. That is a big pivot. Anyway, we can talk about that another day. But the goals are all right, but not. I think I could be more specific and therefore stronger. Particularly, I'd like him OP to focus on a sector.
Mm-hmm.
There is a bit of a theme here, but also not. Is it tech? Right, OP's set up an EV charging station. That's cool from a tech perspective. OP also has real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Is it law? Like, I don't know. I don't know exactly where to pin OP's profile. And that is, from a professional perspective, potentially an issue. It's a bit mixed. So the pros overall then, strong GRE, broad experience. Cons, extracurriculars, no clear thread, and the demographic. In conclusion, I think T15 is realistic. M7 would need something quite special, which I'm not seeing right now, but doesn't mean it's not there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And should we address that low GPA now?
Okay, let's do it. So, generally speaking, applicants with a GPA lower than about 3.2, 3.3 should explain it to the schools,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're quite a lot lower than the school average. And therefore, you're going to potentially negatively impact the average of that they have to submit to the rankings. Not in this case, because it's an international GPA. It's not on the 4.0 scale, so it doesn't have that effect, but it does still need explaining. So most people would explain that in an optional essay. That's generally the place to do so. The prompt looks something like, if you have any circumstances, anything that you'd like to explain about your profile, such as academic performance, choice of recommenders, criminal record is something some of them mention, then please explain it here. And they give you an optional essay to write to explain why your GPA is low. And I guess that's what you'd like to touch on next.
Yes, I would actually like to show OP how to write an optional essay right now, if that's fine.
Brilliant. Let's go for it. Right. I'm going to stop sharing screen and let you share yours. Show us how you would write an optional essay explaining a relatively low GPA of 3.0. And while you're doing that, I would also like to add that this can be done and it has worked. We worked with a client in round 2 of this year who has a GPA of 2.7 and got into top schools. So it can be done. So we're kind of using that experience here. Mal is going to use that experience here to show us how to write an optional essay to do that.
Okay, so OP, here's how you can write a strong optional essay. I've got an example prompt in here. This is from Cornell Johnson. I'm going to read it out. You may use this essay to call attention to items needing clarification and to add additional details to any aspects of your application that don't accurately reflect your potential for success at Johnson. And one of those might be a low GPA. So in a good optional essay to explain the low GPA, you would first explain the why behind the GPA. That'll be our first step. And this just kind of sets up the context for the circumstances that led to the low GPA. For example, I'm going to read this out. I don't believe my GPA of 5.84 is representative of my academic abilities. At the beginning of my second year, my father lost his job due to prolonged illness. As he was the only earning member in the family, I had to take up a part-time tutoring role to contribute to his medical expenses and to manage the household. Now, this sets up your circumstances for why your GPA is low. Next, you would want to take responsibility where appropriate. Now you own up to these circumstances and you explain why they led to poor academic performance. For example, watching my father's health decline while trying to keep our family afloat was overwhelming. And I found myself with far less time and mental bandwidth to devote to my studies than I had before. And this directly led to a steep decline in my grades. Now you're direct here, you're straightforward, you're not beating around the bush. You're just saying these were the circumstances and that's what led to this. Step 3 would be pivot to evidence that the issue has been resolved. So good optional essay pivots to what you've done to recover from the poor GPA. For example, when my father recovered, I attended extra classes to catch up on missed material, and my grades rebounded. My final year GPA was 5.84, with my last semester being a 7.2 out of 8. So here you're showing, even though your final year GPA was a 5.84, you do have an upwards trending GPA. And unsatisfied with my poor grades, I took on additional academic challenges after graduation, like completing the CFA Level 1 certification. I also scored a 338 on the GRE with a 170 quant score, which I believe better demonstrates my academic ability. Now here you've got clear evidence with data about how you rebounded from the poor GPA. You had an upwards trending score. You had a CFA Level 1 certification. You took additional courses, and you scored a 338 on the GRE with a perfect quant score. And that really points to it tells the school that you know what you're doing. You're not a poor student. It was just those circumstances which led to the poor GPA, and you are academically ready for the MBA program. And in the final step, you will want to highlight what you've learned since then. And for example, rebounding from this low GPA taught me to manage my time efficiently. It made me realize where my priorities lie, and during my MBA, I will be particularly focused on my grade to cement that recovery. And that kind of wraps up this essay really nicely with a takeaway from this experience. And this is about 237 words, around 215 if you take out the prompts here. And typically optional essays range from 200 to 500 words. NYU, for example, is 500 words. So if you have more space, just don't use it all up to fill up that space. Remember to be direct, remember to be concise, and to just give the facts where they are. And yeah, that makes for a really good, strong optional essay.
Excellent. Why don't you take out those headers and show us what the exact essay would look like?
All right. This now is our complete optional essay.
350 words maximum. What are we at?
We've got 214. We aren't using the full 350, but this is still a very impactful essay.
Great. So if you had other issues that needed to be addressed, maybe you would add them at the end, and that would take you nearer to the 350. Don't feel like in the optional essay you have to use all the word limits. That's not the point of the optional essay. It's explain, show that you've recovered, show what you learned, and then end it.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much for that. So anybody watching who has a low GPA, and from my understanding of Reddit roasts, there's quite a few of them out there, use Mal's template, Mal's structure to write a compelling optional essay and get in touch if we can help you overcome your low GPA to get admitted into a top program. OP, good luck with your T15 and M7 applications. Let us know if we can help. And if you enjoyed today's roast, make sure to like the video, subscribe so you can watch more of these. We publish a roast every week, have done for the last 50 or so weeks. We're at roast 52 today. So plenty more content coming right up. Mal, thank you very, very much again for today and going off on that random tangent. And I'll see you next week.
All right. See you next week, Sam.
See ya.